Larry Hagman left behind a mysterious $5 million mansion when he passed away. That infested sleep tower, cable-hung beds, and reports of Scientology-built underground bunkers. We're now disclosing, for the first time, what actually transpired following the Dallas star's passing and why his ideal home became the focus of the most bizarre conspiracy in Hollywood. On September 21, 1931, Larry Hagman was born in Fort Worth, Texas, by two parents who couldn't be more different. Mary Martin, his mother, was a budding Broadway actress. Benjamin Jackson Hagman, his father, was a dedicated district attorney. Their union was short-lived. They were divorced by the time Larry was 5 years old. His mother relocated to California to pursue her aspirations following the breakup. Larry and his grandma, Juanita Presley Martin, remained in Texas. With her, life was steady and peaceful. She portrayed a world of lights and cheers as she told him about his mother's Broadway fame. However, that solace was short-lived. Larry's grandmother died when he was 12 years old. It was horrible to lose her. He was forced to return to his mother, who was now residing in New York, without her. Had remarried Richard Halliday, a theatrical producer. The stage, the intensity, and the never-ending motion of Broadway were the center of their existence. It was both thrilling and overwhelming for Larry. The main character was his mother. All he was a boy on the sidelines. His father, meantime, had another idea for him. Larry was already drawn to acting, but he wanted him to pursue a steady and respectable career in law. His father sent him to Black Fox Military Institute in Los Angeles before he could make any decisions regarding his future. Although the school's stringent curriculum was intended to develop boys into disciplined leaders, Larry didn't like following the rules. He rebelled even more under the pressure. He began drinking at the age of 14, a habit that would last for years. Although military training was meant to discipline him, it simply increased his desire for independence. His transfer to Weatherford High School in Texas gave him that freedom. Everything changed at this point. He enrolled in a drama class, took his first theatrical appearance, and something clicked. He was able to express himself through acting. Military school has never permitted it. His dad wasn't pleased. A career in law was secure. It was risky to act, but Larry didn't mind. He had already decided. He worked at the Antelope Tool Company, which produced oil field equipment, to support himself. Although it had nothing to do with performing, the job helped him understand commerce and authority. He would use those experiences to develop J.R. Ewing, one of the most recognizable characters on television. Years later, Larry had a knack for observing people, researching them, and determining what drove them, even as a youngster. He studied dance and acting at Bard College in New York after graduating in 1949. There were many artists and free thinkers at the institution. He enjoyed it, but structure wasn't his forte. It was nothing like military school. He left school after a year and entered the acting industry, prepared to take on whatever came his way. In 1950, Larry Hagman began his acting career at Dallas's Theater in the Round, owned by Margot Jones. It was his first foray into the theater industry, which would influence the rest of his life. He was given the opportunity to collaborate with some of the top actors in the business when he was cast in The Taming of the Shrew at New York City Center a year later. Although it wasn't a leading role, it helped him get started. He made an even more significant move that same year. He went to London to see his mother perform in South Pacific on the West End. With more than 800 performances over almost 2 years, the show was already a huge hit. Hagman sang in the chorus and had a brief speaking role. However, he couldn't have found a more unique experience than being a part of something so large. Mary Martin's portrayal of Nellie Furbush exemplified what it meant to be a working actor. He picked up knowledge by doing, listening, and observing. He was drafted by the U.S. Air Force in 1952, just as he was starting to establish himself in the theater industry. His duty may have prevented him from acting entirely, but it led him in a different direction. He was assigned to the Special Services, a unit that provided entertainment for U.S. troops in London. In addition to performing, he created and directed concerts, touring around Europe to provide military with live entertainment. He was learning how to put together shows that engaged an audience, manage projects, and work under pressure. His life was likewise altered by the Air Force. He met Swedish fashion designer Maj Axelsson while stationed in London. After falling in love, the couple got married in 1954. In addition to gaining invaluable expertise, Hagman had a family by the time he concluded his duty in 1956. He immediately returned to acting after arriving back in New York. He appeared in Comes a Day in The Nervous Set, among other Broadway and off-Broadway shows. In 1958, he made his Broadway debut alongside God and Kate Murphy. Although television was beginning to play a larger role in the entertainment sector, Hagman never completely abandoned theater. Throughout his career, it was a constant and a location he could always go back to. When he joined the soap opera The Edge of Night in the early 1960s, it was his first stable television position. His character was recurrent from 1961 and 1963. It was hard work on a soap opera. It demanded emotive performances, rapid memorization, and the capacity to follow plots that moved quickly. It was a television acting crash course. Then everything changed in 1965. He was cast in I Dream of Jeannie as Major Tony Nelson. In order to make his life as hectic as possible, the show coupled him with Barbara Eden, who portrayed a cunning Jeannie. There was an immediate spark between them. Because of the popularity of the show, which ran for 5 seasons, Hagman became a household name in households all throughout the nation. The story began when Tony, a captain in the United States Air Force, crashed on a remote island while on a space mission. Unaware of what would happen, he discovered an old bottle while exploring and removed the cork. Jeannie, portrayed by Barbara Eden, was a 2,000-year-old woman who appeared out of a puff of pink smoke. His life changed drastically after that. From the beginning, Jeannie was completely enamored with Tony, referring to him as master and doing everything in her power to please him. The issue was that her attempts to assist typically made matters worse. Tony had to hide her pranks before anyone discovered them, since she used magic to transform ordinary occurrences into mayhem. With Jeannie around, it was almost impossible for him to lead a typical life and have a prosperous career in the Air Force. She always managed to make things interesting, regardless of how many times he cautioned her to keep out of trouble. Tony was portrayed by Hagman as the somber, law-abiding police who was constantly on the verge of going insane. The show was made funnier by his ability to respond to Jeannie's crazy notions with annoyance and incredulity. Tony's sentiments for Jeannie began to shift with time. He initially viewed her as a challenge, someone he needed to control. However, he became softer as the seasons passed. Fans were divided by the couple's plan to be married by the 5th season. While some felt it destroyed the connection that made the show so entertaining to watch, others saw it as a logical evolution. I Dream of Jeannie was an immediate sensation when it debuted in 1965. A drama that might rival Bewitched was exactly what NBC was looking for. The magical mischief was a hit with viewers, and in its first season, it was in the Nielsen Top 30. However, Hagman's success wasn't always straightforward. He found it difficult to leave the part when the show concluded in 1970. It wasn't simple to get cast in something different after Hollywood saw him as Major Nelson. Things were far from ideal off-screen. On-screen chemistry between Hagman and Barbara Eden was strong, but off-screen he was erratic. He thought Eden's character received more attention than his own, and he wasn't pleased with the scripts. Overwhelmed and frustrated, he resorted to drugs and drink. His on-set antics became legendary, and his behavior became problematic for the crew and actors. On certain days, he arrived intoxicated. On other occasions, he used LSD prior to filming. For the purpose of making everyone laugh, he once showed up in a gorilla suit. On another occasion, he snatched up an axe and began yelling at the crew. The most disturbing incident, however, was when he became so irate that he peed on the set furnishings. Later on, Eden acknowledged that collaborating with Hagman could be challenging. Filming was difficult because of his mood swings and erratic outbursts, but she always admired him as an actor and friend. NBC hired a therapist to help because things grew so awful, but the plan didn't work out because the therapist actually pushed Hagman to use drugs in the hopes that it would help him relax. Executives thought about terminating him at one time, but they understood that without him, the show wouldn't function. Hagman reflected regretfully on that period of time years later. His relationships, career, and health have all suffered as a result of his drinking and drug usage. His on-screen performance, however, never faltered in spite of everything. He delivered regardless of what was going on behind the scenes. I Dream of Jeannie had a profound effect that went beyond the drama. In the 1960s, when the show debuted, conventional gender norms were being challenged. At first glance, Jeannie appeared to be the epitome of a lady who was there just to serve her husband. In fact, though, it was she who had the authority. Even though Tony was in command, he spent most of his time attempting to keep the havoc she caused under control because she could make anything happen with a blink of an eye. The show didn't age well in every way. Hollywood had been romanticizing Middle Eastern culture for years, and Jeannie's outfit and narrative tapped into old preconceptions. Nevertheless, the show was a favorite for decades despite its shortcomings. Despite the fact that the magic was imaginary, it had a very real effect on television. Before Dallas, Larry Hagman was already a well-known actor, but no one could have predicted how drastically one part would alter his career. He played the endearing astronaut Major Nelson in I Dream of Jeannie before venturing into the world of vicious oil transactions and family conflicts. It was a fun presentation with lots of magic tricks. Dallas was the exact opposite. Power battles, treachery, and drama were all part of it. And the guy everyone loved to loathe, J.R. Ewing, was at the heart of it all. J.R. wasn't your typical TV antagonist. He was affable, cunning, and constantly ahead of the game. Audiences were so engrossed in Hagman's portrayal that they forgot he was ever a comedian. The entire cast ended up riding Hagman's coattails for more than 10 years, as even his co-star Patrick Duffy acknowledged. JR's unpredictability was what made him so memorable. He might be utterly likable one minute and vicious the next. Later, Hagman disclosed that he drew inspiration for JR from actual events. He shaped the character's attitude by drawing on his experience working for a strict boss on a Texas farm. Additionally, he took some characteristics from a part he played in the movie Stardust. Whatever inspired him, it was successful. JR swiftly rose to prominence as the show's most significant character, making Dallas a global sensation. Fans included members of the British royal family, and it was broadcast in more than 90 countries. The Ewing's renowned estate, South Fork Ranch, became a popular tourist destination, yet it was nothing compared to the most memorable TV scenes of 1980. A House Divided concluded with JR being shot by an unidentified assailant. An unprecedented surge of exhilaration was triggered by that one moment. Everyone was curious as to who fired the shot. There was more to it than a TV cliffhanger. It became into a worldwide craze. People sported shirts that said "Who shot JR?" It was the subject of jokes from politicians. Lawmakers in Turkey apparently interrupted their meetings to witness the major announcement. See the response when the whodunit episode aired. The shooter turned out to be JRS's sister-in-law and ex-mistress, Kristen Shepard. It was a unique televised event. The program received an incredible Nielsen rating of 53.3, making it one of the most watched episodes ever. This indicated that over half of all American households with a television were watching. The actual game, however, was taking place off-screen for Hagman. He knew Dallas couldn't afford to lose when his contract was up for renewal. The cards were played flawlessly by J.R. Hagman. While negotiations were still ongoing, he made it apparent that he was prepared to walk away and went for London with his family. Producers even considered removing JR off the program at one time, but they knew deep down that they couldn't. Hagman prevailed. He was making $15,000 an episode prior to the Who Shot JR frenzy. Following the talks, he was paid $100,000 per episode. He became one of the most paid TV performers by the conclusion of Dallas, earning $250,000 each episode. Additionally, he obtained a portion of the earnings from Dallas products, which was practically unheard of at the time. Everyone was surprised when Larry Hagman returned to Dallas in 2012. He was 80 years old and battling illness when he took on the role of JR. Ewing as if he had never been gone. Over 8 million viewers watched the first week of the TNT remake when it debuted on June 13, 2012. It became the year's largest scripted cable premiere. Hagman's role was not limited to JR. Once more, he improved him more. He had additional dimensions that added to his appeal, yet he was still as shrewd and merciless. He was commended by critics for giving a character he had previously made legendary more nuance. It wasn't easy to film. While working on the show, he was undergoing chemotherapy for throat cancer, which he had been diagnosed with in 2011. He didn't slow down, though. He continued to show up, delivering each line with the same passion that made JR famous. Then he died in November 2012 while Season 2 was being produced. His passing was a great loss for television history as well as the program. The authors were aware that they needed to properly honor him. The funeral for J.R. Ewing took place in Episode 8 of Season 2. It was a farewell to the role and the actor who portrayed him, not just a scene. Fans sensed it. The characters sensed it. The homage was the sort that conveyed the irreplaceability of Hagman without the use of words. Hagman shone his ability to play meaningful movie roles outside of television. He portrayed Jack Jones, a millionaire whose riches and influence have tainted everything around him, in Oliver Stone's 1995 film Nixon. Although the performance felt like a representation of something real, the character wasn't based on a real person. It reminded me of JR, but with a deeper, more sinister undertone. He portrayed Governor Fred Picker, a straightforward politician with a problematic past, in Primary Colors, 1998. Despite facing a talented ensemble that included Emma Thompson and John Travolta, he made an impression. He portrayed his role with the ideal balance of charm and subdued intensity, serving as a moral counterpoint to the film's morally dubious protagonist. The part demonstrated that he was more than simply a TV actor. In narratives that realistically addressed ambition and power, he continued to amaze people throughout the latter years of his career. He appeared as Frank Kaminsky, a boisterous and annoying suitor for Lynette Scavo's mother, in Desperate Housewives as a guest in 2011. Although there were just 2 episodes, Hagman was at his best. It's funny, a bit excessive, and hard to ignore. Before accepting the part, he hadn't even seen the show, but his granddaughter persuaded him to. It turned out to be one of his final roles before he moved back to Dallas. In the meantime, Maj Axelson and Larry Hagman were married for almost 60 years. It was based on resiliency and wasn't merely lengthy. Through a common friend, they first crossed paths at an Air Force supply post in the early 1950s. Maj, a Swedish fashion designer, relocated to London for work. She thought Larry was excessively showy when she first met him, but she gradually warmed up to him. They didn't have a conventional engagement. Their erratic life together seemed to be defined by the moment Hagman proposed while their automobile got stranded in the mud. Maj was more than simply his spouse. She was his staunchest ally. She accompanied him on his filming trips and supported him as his career flourished. However, Larry Hagman's marriage wasn't without its challenges. Concerning his adultery, occasionally even inviting his mistresses home for dinner. Most marriages would have ended when some joined the family in the jacuzzi, but Maj stayed. She decided to ignore the mayhem around them and concentrate on the life they had. Their marriage was anything but typical, as their daughter Heidi subsequently disclosed in her novel, The Eternal Party. But Maj was by his side the entire time. She supported him in his fight against substance abuse and alcoholism. They also collaborated on projects that were important to them, such as solar energy and organ donation. Hagman's life away from the screen was as crazy as the characters he portrayed. He lived in Malibu for more than 20 years, throwing famous parties there. Hollywood elites, socialites, and celebrities flocked to his house. These were no ordinary gatherings. They were flamboyant, full of wild antics and incessant drinking. For fun, he once rode home in a bright green gorilla suit. He didn't try to conceal his extravagant lifestyle. Silent Sunday was one of his oddest habits. He would not talk on Sundays. He whistled instead. He had a whole system in which various whistles had distinct meanings. One indicated yes, and another no. A complete set of signals was needed for more complex concepts. He adhered to it for decades, but his friends and co-stars never truly understood why. His wife had to place his meal orders while he remained utterly mute, even at restaurants. Some believed it was a means of exercising self-control. Some thought it was simply another of his strange inclinations. He possessed a lot of those. In addition, he practiced a Zen-inspired routine of clapping at sunsets every evening. For those who knew him, his already intriguing personality was further enhanced by the gong bong rites he performed at his meetings at nightfall. He was contradictory in many ways. He sought inner serenity while leading an unrestricted life. At the age of 14, Larry Hagman began drinking. It became a part of his life, not simply a habit. His drinking had gotten out of control by the time he was playing J.R. Ewing on Dallas. He consumed up to 5 bottles of champagne every day. He said that because he only drank enough to remain pleasantly inebriated, he never appeared intoxicated, but the harm was genuine. He was diagnosed with liver cirrhosis by medical professionals in 1992. They discovered a cancerous tumor 3 years later. He had less than 6 months to live without a transplant. He had a liver transplant in August 1995. The procedure took 15 hours. Due to the severity of his disease, physicians had to reconstruct blood arteries in order for the transplant to be successful. Although controversial, the operation saved his life. Even when their health issues were the result of their own decisions, some people thought celebrities like Hagman received preferential treatment. He didn't waste another opportunity, though. He started advocating for sobriety and organ donation. He later acknowledged, however, that he continued to drink in secret until a subsequent health emergency in 2003 ultimately compelled him to give it up permanently. His drinking had an impact on his family in addition to himself. According to his daughter Christina, his drug and alcohol abuse caused chaos in their home. He reflected on everything and begged his family for forgiveness before he died in 2012. He never shied away from his past and was forthright about his difficulties. By doing this, he contributed to raising awareness of the risks associated with addiction and the protracted recovery process. Hagman's path took a different turn in the 1960s. After being introduced to LSD by musician David Crosby, he experimented with it. Everything changed on his first trip. For the first time in his life, he felt a connection to the cosmos. LSD was more than simply a drug to him. It was something more profound to him. He likened it to his later life out-of-body experiences during medical operations. Getting high wasn't the only goal. It was about gaining a fresh perspective on life and death. Many people were afraid about LSD at the time. Openly discussing it could damage someone's reputation, but Hagman didn't give a damn. He was aware that his autobiography, Hello, Darling, might cause controversy, so he wrote about his experiences. He already had other personal issues to deal with. He had stopped using prescription amphetamines and tobacco. During a turbulent period in his life, LSD became a component of his quest for purpose. He was viewed as irresponsible by some. Some thought he was merely an individual attempting to discover the world in his own unique manner. He was diagnosed with stage 2 throat cancer in 2011 at the age of 80. As usual, he responded to it with a sense of humor. J.R. Ewing could get away with anything, he joked. However, even he was unable to avoid cancer. Despite his condition, he continued to work. He kept filming the Dallas revival while receiving therapy. Before his health began to deteriorate, he completed the majority of the second season. His cancer was in remission by the middle of 2012, but it didn't last. After receiving a diagnosis of myelodysplastic syndrome, he developed acute myeloid leukemia. He died in Dallas, the city that turned him into a television icon, on November 23, 2012. His co-stars recalled the man who created J.R. He was referred to as her best buddy by Linda Gray. According to Patrick Duffy, Hagman had always supported him. Heidi, his daughter, said he was affectionate but flawed. In her book The Eternal Party, Christina discussed their complex connection. Although he was exaggerated, those closest to him were aware of the true him, the one who battled, the one who looked for purpose, and the one who ultimately made an effort to reconcile his history. In 1987, Larry Hagman and his spouse, Mosh, began construction on their ideal house. After 4 years, it was completed. It was heaven, as they termed it. The estate, which was perched atop Sulphur Mountain in Ojai, California, offered a view that went on for miles. The Pacific Sea, unending valleys, and the Channel Islands. It was quiet, secluded, and exactly what they had envisioned. The 43-acre farm was covered with avocado and citrus trees. There were more than 400 rose plants, vegetable gardens, and even fowl. The estate provided fresh food directly from the land, making it partially self-sufficient. It was almost impossible for visitors to wander in because of its distant position. Heaven provided the Hagmans with the privacy they desired. The mansion was a marvel in and of itself. A 3-winged home with a courtyard in the Mediterranean style. Despite its enormous size, 23,000 square feet, it was intended to seem cozy and welcoming. It included 5 fireplaces, 9 baths, and 9 bedrooms. The roof of the opulent living area may be pulled back to see the sky. A lap of salt water directly beneath it spanned the floor. The room felt even bigger because the ceilings were raised by 28 feet. They could easily accommodate up to 200 people when they had parties. But beauty wasn't the only thing in heaven. It was also designed to be innovative. One of the biggest domestic solar power systems in the nation was set up by Hagman in 2003. The $750,000, 94-kilowatt array was a game-changer. His annual electricity bill decreased from $37,000 to just $13. Even more power was produced by the technology and sold back to the grid. On-site wells provided water, while the orchards produced fresh fruit. The estate was self-sufficient in addition to being opulent. Hagman's belief in solar energy was so strong that he extended beyond his own house. Inspiring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton to follow suit, he gave solar panels to 6 families in Los Angeles. He was considering more than simply his own property's destiny. He was attempting to change things. Heaven was much more special because of other characteristics. There was a private helipad on the property, but it served more purposes than convenience. Hagman installed a water system that firefighting helicopters might utilize in an emergency in return for authorization to construct it. Heaven was encircled by a wildfire in 1996, and that system was quite helpful. Helicopters fought the fire with water from Hagman's pools, preventing the estate from being destroyed. And the sleep tower came next. It was designed specifically for stargazing and was suspended 36 feet in the air, supported by cables. Unaffected by city light, Ojai boasted among of California's finest sky. Initially, Hagman enjoyed sleeping there in the open air, but he eventually stopped utilizing it. However, guests were unable to get enough of it. Many would climb up and spend the night under the stars after parties and late-night get-togethers. However, there was a single issue. Pets had taken up residence. They frequently nestled in the rafters, which gave the tower's allure an unsettling edge. Hagman seemed unconcerned. He had a way of making fun of things that most people would find annoying. Several times, he permitted guests to sit after merely brushing bat droppings off the mattress. The tower continued to be a popular location even though visitors frequently ended up helping to clean up. On clear nights, the sky above, unhindered by city lights, stretched forever, and the view was too beautiful to ignore. The animals that roamed paradise included bats, among others. Coyotes, bears, and cougars frequently visited. Despite its opulence, the house was situated in the heart of wilderness. However, that was a component of its allure. Even the things that others might find inconvenient, Hagman found beauty in it all. It was as bizarre inside the house. A bed in his bedroom was suspended 36 feet in the air on cables. It wasn't purely aesthetic. The design created the illusion of floating by allowing it to softly move with the breeze. Strange artwork covered the walls of the dwelling. Some were artworks by surrealists. Others were sculptures with unusual patterns and odd shapes. Nothing was typical. At his well-known parties and fundraisers, Hagman likes to use the stories in each piece to spark discourse. The house showed another side of him in 2012. The walls were plastered with family images that depicted not only his time in Hollywood but also his close relationship with his wife, Maj Axelson, and their kids. There were photographs of Jock Ewing, the fictitious patriarch of the Ewing family, among other Dallas memorabilia. The part that Jr. The reminders were crucial because Ewing had turned Hagman into a television legend. Unmissable. There were scribbled notes among his possessions. Letters were among them. Others were reflections on life, celebrity, and his life lessons. They provided insight into a guy who had evolved over time. After receiving a liver transplant in 1995, he transformed from a Hollywood wild card to an ardent supporter of organ donation. Heaven, Larry Hagman's estate, sold for $5 million in cash in 2013. The purchaser was a nonprofit organization associated with the Church of Scientology, a group that frequently purchases prominent real estate. Celebrities had been congregating at this estate for gatherings and fundraisers for years. It was going to change into something quite different now. Following the acquisition, Scientology transformed the property into Narconon OG, a posh drug recovery facility. By 2015, it was accepting customers and providing courses based on the principles of Scientology, the founder of the organization, Ron Hubbard. With monthly fees of about $30,000, the establishment drew affluent people, including celebrities like Tom Cruise and John Travolta. However, the techniques of treatment were not typical. Patients had rigorous sauna sessions and took high vitamin dosages in place of conventional rehabilitation techniques. These techniques were condemned by medical professionals who claimed they had a solid scientific foundation. This rehabilitation facility was a component of a much bigger scheme. Similar institutions have been opened by Scientology all throughout the world, establishing upscale treatment facilities that doubled as recruitment sites. In addition to seeking assistance, people were given an introduction to the program's guiding principles. Even though this change was odd, there were whispers that it was not the whole story. Some thought that Hubbard's writings on titanium plate had been stored in subterranean tunnels beneath the estate. Scientology had previously done this in other places, storing his writings in bunkers designed to withstand natural disasters for thousands of years. In the event of a worldwide emergency, some ex-members even asserted that these underground locations might house Scientology's most influential leaders. No, there was a vault beneath Narconon Ojai, but the estate was the ideal hiding place because of its remote location on Sulphur Mountain. The church had a reputation for secrecy throughout the years, and this was simply another mystery involving the land.